great to see you all. So we are going to get started. I know that the last session just kind of carried over, so we'll probably have more folks coming in, but we are super excited to see each of you. And so I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Kimberly Dorsett, and I am a branch banking executive at Truist. Super excited to be here today. And so, as you probably heard earlier on the main stage, our CEO spoke, and our relationship with Operation Hope spans over 10 years. And as Bill and John Hope Bryant talked about, over 50,000 people that we've been able to collaborate and co-create and help improve their financial perspective. So we are very, very excited. We do that via our Operation Hope Inside coaches throughout 850 of our branches, and still counting, right? So still counting, so we are very excited about that. We have also been able to, and have the privilege to partner with Operation Hope with the 1MBB initiative since the day of inception. And so we're very proud of that work so far as well. So I was very excited. And I have the opportunity to also sit on the Operation Hope Southeast board and have done so for the last just about 5 years. So very, very excited about this partnership, very excited about this forum of every single year and what we do together in the community. So enough about me. I am really excited to have our esteemed panel introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their business, maybe give a fun fact for the audience. So before we launch in, so Franz, why don't I start with you?
Thank you so much. And I'm Franz Pasha. I think it's on. Somebody was, okay. One of the purple crew is letting me know. I'm Franz Pasha. I'm the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer of PayPal. We've been proud to be part of the Operation Hope community for a good number of years. And when I saw this, the name, the title of this panel, I thought this is probably the common thread for every single person who's gathered at this forum, because of course there's nothing more important than community impact and investing in our communities. And I know, many companies do this in many different ways. At PayPal, part of our mission is to draw on our core capabilities, on our platform, on our scale, on our employee body, to improve the financial health of the communities that we live in and that we support, and to focus on improving the financial health of particularly vulnerable communities all over the world. And we try to do that both in times of challenge and in times of opportunity and in times of prosperity. I'm looking forward to the discussion, so I won't spend too much more. I guess a fun fact, I don't know if this is a fun fact, but it's an interesting fact perhaps. We have, over time, had a huge interest among our employee body in volunteering, and this year our employees are aiming at 100,000 volunteer hours, which for us is a lot for our employee body, and we're almost there. So the fun fact is, at some point, and maybe Paul will tell me, we might even reach 100,000 during this conversation, so we'll see.
Fantastic. Thanks, Franz. Deborah?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Deborah Lamb, and I lead the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation. We are a younger social enterprise group that, like Operation Hope, is based out of Atlanta, but is impacted throughout the state and going into the region. And so what makes us unique is that we are a public-private partnership in a sense that we get pooled funding, shared from public sector, from private sector, and then it invests in 4 main pillars: workforce development, economic opportunity, community research, and student engagement. We call ourselves a hybrid in a sense that we are a funding intermediary where we're actively giving grants away, but we're also what we call a do tank, which is the opposite of think tank, because we have on-the-ground programming across these 4 pillars. So it's not enough to give a grant and come back a year later and expect things to happen. It's really important for us to couple that financial capital with social capital and really think about who else do you know, what else can we help you with, and really build those innovation investments on the ground. We think that innovation is ultimately an important tool for shared economic prosperity, but historically it's been uneven, siloed, and exclusive to certain sectors, demographics, et cetera. And so what we want to do is lower the barriers to entry for innovation, foster nonlinear pathways for innovation, and know that you can innovate well and good simultaneously. So thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Everybody wants to be part of a do tank. That's right. I like that. Troy.
All right, I'm last. My name is Troy Dennis. I'm an product executive at MasterCard. I lead our financial inclusion efforts for North America. I also lead our prepaid product strategy for North America. Along with that, I also lead our ESG strategies for North America as well. So I wear a few hats. I think what's interesting about my role is I sit in the intersection between our commercial line of business and our social impact line of business. And so I think as we think about the work that we do at MasterCard, we are not a credit card company, we are a technology company. And we're a technology company that is focused on doing well by doing good. We fundamentally believe in our core benefits is that when you can do well by doing good, and so focusing on the community is very, very important. It's core to our CEO. It's part of our mission. And as I say that I lead our ESG strategy. We're one of the first organizations, Fortune 500 companies, that embedded ESG into everyone's compensation. So from the CEO down to anyone that starts at MasterCard, it's embedded in your compensation, ESG, because we want it to actually be part of the core environmental, social, and governance. And so for this, we're going to talk a lot about the social impact, but they all intersect really, really well. And so the life at MasterCard, you'll feel it in everything we do. It's not, we want to do well, we want to do good, and we do good, and we do well, but it's really doing good. It's really doing good that matters. And so there is a theme and there's a spirit and an energy around how do we impact the local communities that we serve. And this is one of the main reasons why I actually joined MasterCard. My background is in banking. I've worked at a few regional banks, but because of that intersection between the community and the business, I think is an amazing role, and it's hard to find some organizations. Well, in this room, it's easy, but outside this room, it's hard to find organizations that are focused on both.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And for those of you who have just joined, welcome. We are so glad that you are here. Welcome. I feel like my back is turned to some. So we're going to dive into some of the questions today. And so we're really excited to talk about this topic of community investment. And so I'll start with Deborah and then maybe go to Troy and talk a little bit about defining community investment, right? Kind of from your vantage point, and why it's crucial from both an economic standpoint, but also a social standpoint. So Deborah, why don't you kick off?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So to me, I think when we think about community investment, we have to take a step back and think about what we need to invest in. And historically, I think of it in terms of infrastructure. So there are three kinds of infrastructure in my mind. The first type of infrastructure is everyone's most familiar with, which is the physical infrastructure. Mm-hmm. It is the roads, the streets, the built environment, everything that you see in order to live and work in your community. And historically, we have mainly focused on physical infrastructure. However, as we have rapidly evolved in technology advancement, we have added two more layers of infrastructure. The second layer, in my mind, is the virtual or the digital infrastructure. So think about all the data that's being collected from your phones, and where does that live? Where do you store it? Where is the persona that you have in this virtual infrastructure? So there's a whole another layer of infrastructure. And then the final layer of infrastructure, and the why we are here, is ultimately people, the social infrastructure, and how the social infrastructure interacts with the virtual and the physical infrastructure. So when you add three layers of infrastructure, that is a very dynamic, evolving environment. And what makes us really interesting is that unlike physical infrastructure, there is less clarity on who owns, operates, governs, has budgetary authority over these other two layers of infrastructure. So when I think about community investment, I think that it needs to invest holistically into these 3 layers of infrastructure. And that ultimately it's about how people can be empowered and thrive in these 2 other layers of infrastructure that can really span generational mobility, growth, and prosperity. And that is what makes community investment now so exciting, because of the complexity, but also because of the holistic evolvement of these 3 layers of infrastructure.
Wow. Excellent. Thank you very much. We heard John Hope Bryant talk about generational mobility. He didn't quite put it that way, but really, really critical that the work we do today serves our future so impeccably. So Troy, what about you?
Yes. So MasterCard, we all know that, you guys know, MasterCard is a global brand, but we're a global brand with a very local focus, right? And so we look at our communities and we get very locally focused on them. And why do we do that? And why is that important? Because we're fundamentally believe the way we empower and the way we power the economy is, like you said, Deborah, we have to empower people and we have to empower the communities. And fundamentally, we believe that when the communities do well, small businesses grow. When small businesses grow, business grows, right? It just makes good business sense to stay focuses on the community. And so we're here today because we have been long-term partners of Operation Hope. Our current CEO is focused on financial inclusion. Our prior CEO at MasterCard has been focused on financial inclusion. So we have been partners of Operation Hope for over a decade. And so it's not something that happened in 2020. This is something that's core to who we are. So financial inclusion, and to be focused on financial inclusion, you have to be community focused. You have to get grassroots. You have to get local to the community. You have to understand the pulse and understand what portion of the segment in the community that you're going to focus on. And in the US, we focus on the Black community, because our data and insights told us that the Black community is where a lot of the gaps are. And so we intentionally go deep on the Black community and how do we provide impact on them. And so we are partners with Operation Hope, 1 million Black businesses, and so you'll see that embedded throughout. And if you look at MasterCard.com, our in solidarity efforts, it goes to really go deep into what that looks like.
That's fantastic. Please.
One thought. One of the things that we've learned also, and I know this is a very a room of people from all kinds of different backgrounds and enterprises, we've learned that the nonprofit community plays a key role in guiding community investment. That we try to work with nonprofits in the communities that we invest in, that are community-based, that are generating ideas, that have a clear sense of what's needed. And I think it's important for big companies, especially who are working on trying to make sure that that their investments are actually going where they're needed. So we found that, and I know a lot of you in the room are from nonprofits, but you're providing key guidance and ideas and innovation for companies that are looking to do their part in communities. I just wanted to add that to how we think about community investment.
Excellent. Thank you. And so keeping on the theme, when we think about the future, generational mobility, I'll stay on that theme. When we think about the long-term vision of community investment and the ever-changing economic and social landscape, I'll open it up to all three, and we'll start with you, Troy. How are you all thinking about that? Because it's changing so rapidly. So how are you keeping up and adapting to that change?
Selfishly, I can say we're a data insight company, right? So we're data. So we have the pleasure, opportunity to harness our data and insights, not just in the U.S. but globally. And so we mine our data insights. It helps us keep a pulse on the community, a pulse on our customers, and a pulse on the economy. And so when we look at those data and we look at those trends and we say, okay, where do we see the impact? How do we have impact? And so you think about, I'll give you an example. In New York, we used our data insights that helped the city of New York during the pandemic. Okay, how do they want to recover? We saw some things happening in the 5 boroughs We gave advice to the mayor on things that they could do to impact that around small businesses closing, businesses moving out of the city, moving back in the city. And so people don't think about MasterCard as that way, but that is how we use the data and insights that we have outside of, your credit or your debit card, the transaction work, and that's also key. That's really important that they work all the time. And so that's how we use the data and insights on that. And then we think about generational wealth, right? And I talked about the Black community a little bit. And so we delivered a data insight that said we noticed that Black and brown individuals are not going into the data and science field. And so we intentionally made investments in HBCUs. And me as a proud graduate of Hampton University, I was happy to hear that, right? And so we made an investment in HBCUs. And right here in Atlanta, we just gave $6.5 million to the AUC to help build their data and science program. We also gave another $5 million last year to them to help them build their business for small business within Atlanta. We're working across HBCUs across the country to ensure, because we know data and science fields are a strong field, and we talked about the economy, right? And we know if that empowers the economy, strong jobs, creates income, creates strong communities, and so that is how our focus is.
Wow, terrific.
Yeah, so what we think about, especially your question is hard because the problems are difficult, they're complex, they're wicked, and the solutions are hard to define. And so we really think of those as wicked problems, right? It can't be solved by any one entity. Right. There's no end in sight. There's a lot of different change and evolving information. And so what's the best way to solve wicked problems in our mind? And to us, it's about building partnerships, right? Because ultimately, the greatest problems that we're facing, the Operation Hope kind of outlines, poverty, multi-generational mobility and wealth, homelessness, all these kind of things cannot be solved by any one entity, sector, or organization alone, right? So we're all about building public-private partnerships and coalitions. Like, how can we do this collectively and together so that we have a broader toolkit, which includes policy, funding, different business models, all these kind of things coming together, especially wrapped around with applicable innovations and technologies that are used to empower communities that are informed by data, right? So a couple good examples, because I love these examples, what does this actually mean on the ground? So how many people are in Atlanta? Nice. Okay, so for those that might be familiar with Atlanta, if you go to the west side in Thomasville Heights, we have a project there. Thomasville Heights, as you know, has been historically disadvantaged, underserved community. There's a lot going on there. And so we came in with the city of Atlanta, with Morehouse School of Medicine, with Georgia Tech School of Design, and Focus Community Strategies, which is the nonprofit kind of community arm. And we built a team. So think about the team being multi-university, multi-discipline, multi-sectoral, led with local government, nonprofit, coming together, and we funded a project to address energy efficient retrofits. What does that mean? So Thomasville Heights suffers from energy poverty, right? Meaning that they spend a lot of money to heat and cool their buildings, a lot more than maybe some of us spend because we already, have insulated and provided the warm infrastructure into it. So with that, between design, engineering, and technology, they use drones to conduct energy audits in the Thomasville Heights community, and then once they provided that kind of makeup, they were able to put targeted interventions and weatherization kind of projects that were coupled with policies that made it more energy efficient. And then at the end of this project, they did a survey, ultimately with the community, that increased substantially their heating and cooling. So at each one of these 16 homes, it costs about $3,000 to $6,000 a home to do this weatherization project. And it made an enormous difference in terms of their thermal coverage. The idea of what we're trying to do is, if this project can be done in Thomasville Heights, it can be replicated in other similar neighborhoods across the country and region. And that's the type of public-private partnership that we're trying to come. How can you lead with innovations and technologies so these communities have critical access to it, but they're also empowered by it? And then what's great is that the researchers, because they go out of their laboratories and their academic publications and research into the community, that research becomes better, and then they end up getting more grant money and others to actually be able to scale and evolve. And so that's the really concrete stuff of what makes this work on the ground.
Wow. Excellent. Please.
So over the last, I would say, over the last 3 years, we've learned a lot about what is this sort of holistic way that PayPal and other companies can do their part to address the inequities in our economy and to address the systemic racial inequities in our economy. And in 2020, we made a $500 million commitment, so $535 million commitment to do our part to address some of these inequities that became so clear during the pandemic and what was revealed about the vulnerabilities in our economy. And particularly, initially, our focus was the vulnerabilities of Black-owned small businesses. And so of that $500 million, the first thing that we learned was that that in times of distress and urgency, there are immediate needs to support Main Street businesses simply with grants or with immediate access to capital. And our studies showed that Black-owned businesses did not have the infrastructure around them that my colleague was describing, and that they were closing at twice the rate of businesses that were owned by white families or white individuals. So we took $15 million and we just created a grant program working with nonprofits in the highest need areas around the country, and we distributed grants of $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 all across the country. And what was extraordinary, and afterwards then we partnered with colleagues at MasterCard and other companies to support those small businesses with different kinds of non-monetary support. But I can say that over 90% of those businesses survived, and in some regions 99%. And that was not the case, and we learned that sometimes the best thing is just immediate cash to help in a time of crisis, particularly when their inventory needs or needs to meet rent. We also worked with the federal government at that time to make sure that grants that were going to small businesses got to actual small businesses, because PayPal is connected to small businesses all over the country, and we found another way we could use our platform was to help distributing those funds to the actual small businesses, and also to distribute to distribute stimulus checks immediately in a much faster way. The other thing that we did at that time is we invested in a whole array of nonprofits, including Operation Hope, around the country that were addressing community-based needs, knowing that these well-established nonprofits were better suited than a big global corporation to get right at community needs. So we put $10 million into a group of 20 nonprofits that we partnered with and provided employee volunteers to help those programs. Then we invested $100 million into Black and Latino-owned venture funds, understanding that generational wealth can be better created by venture funds and frankly in some early startups that are in Black communities and that are actually creating wealth in those communities that will stay in those communities. And the last piece there were two more pieces. The other is we placed our capital in Black and Latino-owned community banks all over the country, so that from our balance sheet we could put money into communities that would enable those community-based financial institutions to be able to serve their communities. And the last piece is we worked on ourselves, and we understood that to make this sustainable, we needed to really put more investment into our own diversity and inclusion programs, into our own education of our employees, so that we would be sure that we would always be walking the walk and walking the talk, and that we could follow through, and that we would build a culture that would sustain these programs over time. And we've seen an enormous commitment from our employees to sustain these programs. And now the final piece of our investment, which we have now completed, we have put all of those funds out into the communities. The final piece was actually at the Russell Center here in Atlanta, where we created the PayPal Retail Academy to help incubate and support small businesses in the retail space with the kind of infrastructure that we've discussed, and also with some initial grant money. So it's been a real learning journey, but we realize that you have, for us, given the scale we have and the capabilities we have, taking a more holistic approach that combined all of those elements was a way we felt we could start to move the needle. And of course, the work isn't done, and there's a lot more ahead of us. But we're trying to now draw on those learnings and understand where we really were able to make a difference and make sure that we can continue that work.
It's impressive. Really great work, and it is so, it's ongoing, and again, what we're doing today generationally, as we're affecting so much. So if I stay on the theme of this, and you each touched on it, so when it comes to community investment, you know, how do we ensure that we are benefiting all, but with particular attention to those communities that are traditionally marginalized? So Franz, why don't we start with you, and we'll kind of go down, and then go to Deborah and Troy too.
Well, I guess I'll maybe just repeat that one critical way is to stay close to community organizers and nonprofits that are in the community, and we've tried to do that in all of the cities in which we're based. And our employees are actively involved in volunteering, and we support them with grants and with other investments. But another learning that I think applies directly here that I'll share is that, you know, as we looked around, and there were a lot of pledges made by companies, huge pledges in the aftermath of George Floyd during the pandemic to invest in racial equity. But it became clear that a lot of the monies were not getting to the cities and neighborhoods that need it the most. So we joined together with Robert Smith and with BCG and with several other leading companies to create what we called the Southern Community Initiative, which identified the 6 southern cities and regions with the highest proportion of Black and brown communities. And we've created a network to try to be sure that for companies that are looking to bring their dollars to the highest need communities, where racial equity needs to be addressed front and center, will find their way to those communities. Atlanta is one of those communities, and we've worked with a coalition of companies and nonprofits to try to be sure that when companies make pledges or companies put corporate dollars out there, that those investments will find their way to the highest need communities with respect to these issues.
Thanks, Franz.
Yeah, so what we have looked at, I talked a little bit about organizations, but another aspect of what we do is focused on building next generation innovators. So what can happen at the individual level to really think about that generational growth? And one of the things that we have looked at is this chicken and egg issue. Right, it's very hard to get a first job without work experience, and you can't get work experience without a first job. And so you have a lot of this kind of impasse where, you know, you're going into a gig economy or you're becoming serial internshipper because you can't get to that first level. And 2 of our pillars, workforce development and student engagement, start that. So student engagement is focused on students in higher ed. And that means HBCUs, R1s, R2s, technical colleges, smaller liberal arts colleges, et cetera. So, you know, how can we think about starting at that level? And we look at 3 levels of intersectionality. So it's students of any year, rising sophomores all the way up to PhD students. any major, so hard sciences with the soft sciences. You don't necessarily need to be an engineer or a data scientist or something like that. It's actually really important to think about it holistically and think more about the soft sciences coming together with the hard sciences, and now any university in the country. And we focus on fully funded summer internships that are focused on public and innovation and civic technology projects. So what can you do working hand in hand with the community? When we first started this project a few years ago, we had 5 students working on 4 projects, all from Georgia Tech. This past August, we graduated our class of 62 students working from 35 projects throughout the state and a few outside from 25 colleges and universities. And they're all coming together. And what we want to show them is that, there is still a pathway to you can be on the forefront of smart cities and you can learn about it in the classroom, or you can actually be working in the community and doing it. And the other one around workforce development is so much about workforce development has been focused on a lot of different things, but we actually focus on college graduates. Because what we found is that even as a college graduate, as an early career professional, you still need a lot more help, and you need more help because you end up with college debt. And so how do you get out from the college debt to actually get a career? Yeah. So we're looking at a full-year multi-sectoral rotational fellowship where you spend 6 months in the private sector, 6 months in the public sector, focused on growth industries like AI manufacturing, cybersecurity, data scientists, et cetera, to really build fluency in navigating to public-private partnerships. So lots of different ways to really think about how do we build, starting from much earlier in terms of that generational wealth.
Fascinating. Thank you.
I would like to say, very much similar to PayPal, we are focused on financial inclusion. I would like to go deeper on our In Solidarity efforts. We made a $500 million commitment to help closing the economic wealth gap for Black individuals within the U.S. And we did that by focusing, I talked earlier on about data and insights and how we use that. And so we did that by looking at, 7 cities across the country. Not that all the other cities are not important. We chose Atlanta and Birmingham. I happen to live in Birmingham, but that's not why we chose Birmingham. But Atlanta, Birmingham, New York, New Orleans, but we chose those cities because we knew that we can't be everything to everyone. But if we be really intentional around the cities we can go into, we can go deep and get very local, and we can focus on the schools. And I have colleagues here that go out to schools and they do Master Your Card, which is free education on financial literacy, starting at the very young adult ages. I have people from the foundation, our Center of Inclusive Growth, where they work closely with the Rice Center, and not just giving money. And so like big organizations can write checks, we put our people behind it. Right, and so we send in, we send in our executives, we help them with programmatic approaches. I talked a little bit about the AUC. We don't just write checks, we actually work closely with the directors of the university to say, okay, data and science, MasterCard has one of the largest consulting companies, if you put them together, in the country. Right, and so we're bigger than McKinsey, and so we are experts in data and insights and consulting, and so we leverage that. We harness the power of MasterCard globally so that we can ensure that the intentionality that we're doing around our commitments can come to life, and they have real tangible insights that help us do well by doing good. And yes, it does help us do better, and it helps us win more businesses, but that's not the real reason that we do it. And I think continued partnership, the theme here that I'm hearing in the last day and a half is around the importance of partnerships, yes. Right? You have big brands, big names, but if they don't go local and find partnerships that can resonate well within the communities, that is how you create a winning solution.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so this will be the last question, but it's sort of a 2-part question. And so Troy, I'll stay with you if that's okay. And so what do you think 1 or 2 of the kind of the biggest challenges are around community investment? And then what are some of the innovation, kind of what's the innovative ideas that you all have as it relates to trying to overcome them?
I think one of the biggest challenges around community investments is, when times get hard, when things get, the continuation and the fourth that say, okay, we're doing this because at the end of the day, it does well. When the economy is good, everyone wants to make community investments. Something big happens, everyone makes a community investment. It's during the times where things are a little bit challenging for your business model, and do you still double down on those investments? And that really comes from your top leadership, right, within the organizations in the company. I think I'm fortunate to sit with MasterCard because it is top down, right? And it's not just within the U.S. We do a global in solidarity effort. I just talked about what we did in the U.S. We make a global commitment in solidarity globally, and it's different for each country. And so what happens, for each country, so what happens in LAC within the Latin America could look way different because these are data insights. So I think that's the challenge with community investment. It's in and out, and we are intentionally not being in and out. That's why we're focused on financial inclusion. We're focused on, for US, we're focused on Black small businesses. We're also focused on Black and Brown. So it's inclusion for all, right? So we fundamentally believe that inclusion for all helps all tides rise, right? And so around some things around innovation, we focus on fintechs because we're a technology company. So we focus on fintechs. And so we have a program called StartPath. And we have StartPath for in solidarity efforts. We have StartPath for our national efforts as well. And what that is the incubator program that helps Black fintechs come in and empower and links them with MasterCard's data and resources so that they can help thrive within the digital economy. And so we partner them with our customers, we partner with data insights, and we also fund. We also invest. Mocafy is an example of a Black-owned fintech. I got a couple of yeses, yes. So Mocafy is a Black-owned fintech that MasterCard does invest in, and they're focused on the underrepresented in financial education and financial literacy. They send out prepaid cards. They help with some of the government disbursements that you mentioned earlier. Friends, like government makes these disbursements, they can't get money out to the community that needs it. Prepaid is a really good example of that, and Mocafy helps facilitate some of that. And so that's just one example of how we continue to make those things that are difficult, make it a little bit easier.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Welcome.
Deborah?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things for all of us collectively is patience, patient return on investment. And we're talking about multi-generational growth and mobility. We're talking about major changes in the way that we live, work, and play. And ultimately, this takes time. It takes time to build coalitions. It takes time to build the infrastructure. It takes time to build the literacy to really understand how to manage and operate that infrastructure. And it takes time to make those behavioral changes to navigate that. And when we are building a coalition, I am contending with political election cycles. I'm contending with quarterly financial returns from the private sector. I'm contending with communities that obviously have a major sense of urgency, rightfully so, that this should have been done yesterday. And so ultimately, how do we instill that patient return on investment, but make sure that we are moving as rapidly and as urgently and as sustainably as much as we can? And that is a new way of calculating things when, I expect my Amazon package to come in an hour, right? So patient return on investment to ensure that it's actually about thriving, sustainable communities is a change for us that we all have to contend with.
Got it.
So I think one important way to sustain this work is to really embed an ethos of community investment into your mission, into the values of the company, and into the culture of the company. And employees and leaders of the company come to expect it of themselves. And it becomes part of the way you live your life as a company. And I think that becomes very reinforcing because it draws new employees who share that commitment. It becomes part of the course of the year, the course of the rhythm of how people live their professional lives. And I think if you can embed, that sense of responsibility about community investment into the culture of the company, that will sustain you during good times and difficult times. The other thing I'd add, and I think I want to build on, I think MasterCard and PayPal think similarly about this, is that every company, and I'm sure Truist does also, every company has huge capabilities, unique capabilities. Global companies can draw on those in different ways. And so, you know, the way Troy is describing the use of data to support it, you know, I think it's really important for companies to look and say, okay, yes, you can write a check, or you can join a coalition, or you can sign a letter, but what about bringing in your core capabilities to bear in communities, to support those communities and to invest in those communities? And just so for PayPal, one of the ways that we understand we can support economic growth and more inclusive growth is by supporting small businesses in ways that PayPal is able to, by different ways of providing access to capital, different ways of building that infrastructure in communities for small businesses, particularly in communities where they may not have access to traditional banking or may need other ways to find financial support, and ways to enable small businesses wherever they are located to join the digital economy. And all of the research shows that if a small business comes on to a digital platform, payments platform like PayPal, they become global companies from wherever they are and can reach customers all over the world. And so, I mean, that's part of our commitment, is to really focus on small businesses as the lever for economic growth and inclusive growth all over this country and, frankly, all around the world.
That's great.
So it's really stimulating. And I would say, in closing, first and foremost, please make sure throughout the day that you get a chance to talk to Franz or Deborah or Troy and ask them questions. They have a lot more to share. Sustainability is a big takeaway. It's constant. Not only the work that we're doing today fuels the future, that generational mobility piece, but how do we sustain? And that is going to be an ongoing topic, I believe, for the rest of our days. Another takeaway, if you didn't write it down, I think you probably did, or at least I did. Wicked problems? Question mark. That's the next year panel. Wicked problems takes collaboration, right? And so I probably didn't quote that right, but that's pretty cool, right? And so absolutely, these are wicked problems, and it takes all of us. It takes a lot of collaboration internally within our organizations, and of course externally. So let's give our panel a round of applause. You all did a fantastic job.